Our next presenter is Mr. Chris Henwood from Grand & Toy. He's going to be presenting on the aspects of how a reseller uses data.
Awesome, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I think what I'll do is I'll just start and tell you a bit about my background, as boring as it might be. I joined the office supplies industry in 2006. Prior to that, I spent the time from about 1991 until 2006 in the hardware and home improvement industry. So I know I look like I'm probably in my early 20s, but the reality is I have spent all that time in the workforce. I held many roles in the office supplies industry. I actually started in retail management, later moved into category management, physical merchandising, and one of my latest roles was in product development. And the one thing that was universal to all of those roles is the way we use data and the amount of data we used in fact-based decision making. So really the successes we had were driven by the data that we had and the way we used it. So when I joined this industry in 2006, I found it different. I came from the hardware industry where, we used to look at food, drug, and mass and say, wow, those folks are 10 years ahead of us. We worked with AC Nielsen to try and get the hardware industry to a place where food, drug, and mass was. And so we had challenges, but we still had data. And then I moved to the office supplies industry, and I found there was a real contrast, and there was a difference in what was available to us and how we used it. So I'm just going to share that with you to start. One of the first things I found is that there was truly a limited amount of data for B2B or B2C decision making. So I think there's a lot of data sources you can have. You can have syndicated data. You can have data from the supplier side. You can have data that retailers or resellers are sharing. You can have data from sales reps. You can have data from product managers, and you can typically pull all those things together into something meaningful. I think the biggest gap for this industry was that syndicated was really missing. Data from suppliers, data from product managers, data from sales folks was partially, if not entirely, anecdotal. So there was really a big gap in the amount of formal data that we had to make decisions, and it just wasn't being utilized. I found that the supplier relationship at that time was changing. I think the industry had gone through a number of years where resellers were a conduit. They were just a conduit to get product out to the end user. They were a conduit to expose your brand and move more product, but there wasn't a real good understanding of what the customer desired and demanded. And that's changed. I think all of the resellers in the past couple of years have gone through a transformation where they're really paying a lot more attention to what they're selling, what's delivering ROI, what's not delivering ROI. Success would tend to be measured by shipments rather than what was happening at the customer level. So as recently as the last couple of years, I've still had conversations with our partners that would say things like, we had a really good month together last month, or you had a really good month last month because the shipments to you were up 5%. In reality, that has nothing to do with the end user experience. It has nothing to do with the trends in the industry. It's simply an inventory metric, but we're still measuring by that today. There's limited understanding of market share and trends. So this was probably one of the most striking things to me, is that in some of my prior experiences in dealing with companies like Walmart and Canadian Tire, part of the formal review process, the first question that was asked is, I need to understand what your market share is and what your competitor's market share was. And if you were to put up your hand and say, I don't have that information and I don't understand it, you wouldn't be a supply partner for a very long time. I find in this industry, and it's no fault of the suppliers, it's because the data hasn't been there, but in this industry, some of the largest suppliers, when you go into a category review and say, help me to understand your market share and what your competition looks like, they don't know. And they put up their hand and say, we really don't know and we don't have a good handle on our market share, even when they have a relatively good market share. So that is concerning and surprising, because it becomes very difficult to manage your business and understand trends if you don't even know what your market share is. There seems to be an absence of a data culture and fact-based decision making. So one of the things, the other things that was striking to me is I was very used to sharing data. On the retail side and on the manufacturer side, I was very used to having it shared with me. So at Walmart, you can log into Retail Link and you can see everything that's happening with your products, basically up to the hour, the trends that are happening. You can make recommendations to them about product placement, about pricing decisions, to actually affect change instantly for the positive. Same thing at Canadian Tire, although it's less sophisticated. Suppliers can log into their system and on a daily basis see the activity on every SKU, see what's happening, understand what the market dynamics are, have a conversation with their category managers to see how you can affect positive change. In this industry, that didn't exist. At Grandin Toy, we were reluctant to share data with our supply partners. In fact, today there are only a few that we actually share it with. And from what I understand, a lot of the resellers in the industry are in the same place. We're reluctant to share it because we don't believe it's embraced, and we don't believe there's a good understanding of how to use it today, and the culture isn't there. So we would rather spend the time sharing data with folks that use it, they embrace it, and they understand it, rather than just having data floating around everywhere where it's not going to be utilized. So I think as an industry, we need to focus on building that data culture and ensuring that we understand how to use the data and what to do with it and use it as an input into the decision-making process. I also think without having data, there really isn't a true understanding of ROI. I find we're consistently measuring things again by sort of what came in the door and what went out. But if you don't know what the industry trends are to compare that to, it's pretty tough to understand what your return on investment is. You might spend a whole lot of time building a promo or doing some activities, and it makes no difference when you look at your year-over-year comparison. The reality is the rest of the market is declining at 3%, so you actually have affected change and there's been an ROI on what you've done. But without having data to view, you really can't understand that. And it's tough for me to understand how anyone wants to make decisions in an environment where there's no ability to understand what the true ROI is. And I think the most important thing is we spend time looking back and inward rather than looking outside and forward. Everything we do is sort of measured on last year we did this, last year we sold this much, last year your shipments were this much. How does it compare? But I can tell you with 100% certainty in this industry, the past is not indicative of what is going to happen in the future. I think you've seen some numbers that are alluding to the trends that are happening. Darren is going to make a further connection of how all that paper stuff lines up to what's happening in the industry and bring it all together. But the reality is you need to be cognizant of the past, but it is not at all going to be indicative of what's going to happen in the future. So I've taken this down to a bit of a micro level. Some of the others are talking at a macro level about data, but I just wanted you to understand sort of how we use it. For us, it really gives us better visibility into the life cycle stage of a product or a category. So it really helps us to understand where things are in the overall life cycle so we can manage them appropriately. It allows us to more accurately forecast for inventory. So obviously, if you have a product that's in the life cycle stage where it's on its way down, you're continuing to treat it like it's last year and the numbers are growing and everything is fine, it tends to get you into inventory situations where you end up with dead and obsolete inventory. So we use it for that. We use it for visibility to average price points in a category so we can better understand what's happening in the marketplace and build more effective pricing strategies. We use it to understand market share, position, and direction. We use it to improve the performance of new item launches. So we tend to look very carefully at new item launches and understand the volume that's being driven by them, and understand cannibalization as well. The reality is we don't have a lot of customers reaching out to us asking us to buy more office supplies at a higher price. I don't know if any of you do, but if you do, tell me what the secret is. So it's very important for us to use data to understand when we launch a new product, how does it affect our existing basket, and was there an ROI on it, or did we erode sales and GP from somewhere else? Probably most importantly, it allows us to identify and leverage emerging trends, so we can see things happening and act on them before they have a negative impact on our bottom line. And finally, it helps us to understand the ROI, so we can truly calculate, how we have benefited or not benefited from an initiative. I just wanted to share with you some common objections I have heard in the past with past organizations about data. And these are real things. The wording might be slightly different, but the message is the same. I've had partners say that we have a large market share, so we understand the market better than anyone. Don't need data, have 80% of the market share. What could I possibly use it for? The reality is there's lots of categories that are adjacent to yours. There's lots of categories that influence yours. And better understanding what's happening in adjacent influencing categories allows you to manage your business a whole lot better than you would if you're looking inward again and at your own data. Category is declining, so there's no ROI on data utilization. I would argue that in a declining category, that's probably one of the most important places to use data. We will have declining categories in this industry. There's going to be lots of them. I don't think that's a secret. The reality is it allows you to manage more profitable decline. So you can spend the returns on other things and growing other businesses. We're achieving our growth targets without data. There's not much to be said about that other than that's great that you're achieving your growth targets, but utilizing data allows you to do so much more. And I think everyone wants to exceed their growth targets. This is just a snapshot of how we do assortment planning. This isn't something I baked up. This is actually part of the AC Nielsen category management process. And this really is 4 perspectives that you bring in when you're talking about assortments or when you're assortment planning. And the largest piece, and arguably the most important piece, is the customer perspective, understanding customer buying behavior, customer trends, customer decision-making process, and the customer decision tree. The other 3 are supplier share and efficiency. So, how do our suppliers contribute? How efficient are they? How good of a partner are they? How are their supply and performance metrics? Market share information at the bottom, so share and benchmarks. And then, of course, our internal contribution and productivity. So we look at our own numbers and how categories perform for us and make business decisions about them. 2 of those are highlighted in red because those are the areas that are missing today. So out of the category management process and the inputs that are being used in food, drug, mass, hardware and home improvement, and a host of other industries, the office supplies industry is really missing 2 of them, and one of them being the most important. So we're managing our baskets today based on how the supplier is and how good a partner they are and what their metrics look like and our own numbers. But the 2 most fundamentally important things are totally absent from the process today. And that's one of the things that data supports directly, is making sure that you get these 2 perspectives back into the loop. This is a chart we use internally with our category management teams. I think every reseller, whether they have a formal system in place or not, they tend to pick a place that a supplier, how a supplier is going to be a partner with them or how they're going to engage with them. So at Grand Toy, we actually have a formal system in place where category managers document what role the supplier is going to play in our business. And that ranges from everything on the left hand of the slide to a simple supplier, where we're simply cutting POs. We have no relationship. We have no dialogue. We talk infrequently. Up to strategic ally, where you're actively engaged in our business. You understand it better than we do in some cases. We actively share data. We share data in 2 directions. And we have a good, strong relationship. I would argue today that the vast majority of our supply vendors fall into the preferred supplier or partner position on this slide. We strive to get our largest vendors into the strategic advisor or strategic ally, but because we're not embracing a data culture, because they're not able to come to us with actionable insights, and because they're not helping us with fact-based decisions, it's very difficult for us to migrate them to strategic advisor. So today, the vast majority sit around preferred supplier or partner. So I think it is critical that we start helping suppliers move along that continuum. And the reality is, the further you get to the right of this slide, the more sticky you are to us, the more entwined you are with us, and the more risk that things will be, or the more benefit that things will be consolidated to you. The farther you are on the left, closer to supplier, the more risk that you are just consolidated out as a partner and no longer do business with us. Just to share some final words, we're talking a lot about data in here today. What I don't want anyone to do is believe that syndicated data or data that COPA can provide is the only input that you need to be making into this decision-making process. It's an important piece, but it's not the only thing. You need to be ensure that you're taking data from another number of places to form insights and actions. It's not a magic bullet. It will not be everything. Sometimes you will not get insights from it. Sometimes you will get great insights from it. If you're not getting involved in data, someone else in your business will be, and those folks that are will be the ones that are going to be a more valuable supply partner to the resellers. And probably the most important thing is stay curious, not thirsty, but curious. We have a person in our office. He's actually a pricing manager, and this fellow is the most curious person that I've ever seen. So in his downtime, he runs reports and he sifts through data, and he finds more actionable insights that allows us to make decisions about our business than you could imagine. He literally comes to me every day with lists of accounts and pricing information and points out to me where we can develop a better and stronger pricing strategy. So I encourage everyone in the room to stay curious yourselves, but also have someone in your organization that looks at data and stays curious at all times. And that is it for me. Thank you.